Jeremiah Taylor watched silently as the airline staff who had humiliated him yesterday now stood trembling before him. None recognized him as the black passenger they'd removed from first class. "I've purchased your airline," he announced coldly. "And you're all terminated, effective immediately." Before we dive into this shocking story, where are you watching from today? Hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever witnessed discrimination and wanted justice to be served. Let's see how this powerful CEO turned the tables on those who wronged him. Jeremiah Taylor was exhausted. After 3 days of non-stop meetings for his tech company's charity initiative providing computers to underfunded schools in Baltimore, he just wanted to get home and sleep in his own bed. The 45-year-old CEO of NextGen Solutions had built his tech empire from nothing, and tomorrow's merger negotiations in San Francisco would potentially double the company's value to $12 billion. He approached the first-class check-in counter at Baltimore International Airport wearing jeans, sneakers, and a plain black hoodie, comfortable clothes for the 6-hour flight ahead. His casual attire was a stark contrast to the $5,000 first-class ticket he'd purchased. While most CEOs his level flew private, Jeremiah preferred commercial flights when traveling alone. It kept him grounded, connected to real people. "Ticket and ID, please," said the gate agent, barely looking up. Jeremiah slid his documents across the counter. The agent's eyes flicked between his ID and his face, then back again. "Is there a problem?" Jeremiah asked, recognizing the look. He'd seen it countless times before. "Just one moment, sir," the agent replied, picking up a phone and speaking in hushed tones. 5 minutes later, as the first-class line backed up behind him, a flight attendant approached. Her name tag read, Stephanie Wilson. "Sir, there seems to be some confusion with your ticket," she said, her smile thin and forced. "There's no confusion. I purchased a first-class ticket," Jeremiah replied calmly. Stephanie glanced at his casual clothes, then back at her tablet. "Yes, but we're showing some discrepancy in the payment. Would you mind stepping aside while we sort this out?" White passengers in business attire streamed past them, boarding with nothing more than a cursory glance at their tickets. None were asked to verify payment. The payment went through. $5,000, charged to my company card, Jeremiah said, pulling out his phone to show the confirmation. "Sir, please lower your voice," Stephanie said, though Jeremiah hadn't raised it. "I'm not raising my voice. I'm simply stating facts." The situation escalated when Jeremiah finally made it onto the plane and found his seat, 1A, window seat, first row. As he was settling in, a white man in an expensive suit approached. "Excuse me, I believe you're in my seat," said the man, not bothering to check Jeremiah's ticket or his own. "1A is my assigned seat," Jeremiah replied, showing his boarding pass. The man, who would later be identified as Bradley Whitman, CFO of a competing tech company, scoffed. "There must be some mistake. I always get 1A. Before Jeremiah could respond, Stephanie appeared. "Is there a problem here?" "Yes," said Whitman immediately. "This gentleman is in my preferred seat." Stephanie turned to Jeremiah. "Sir, perhaps there's been a mix-up. Let me see your boarding pass again." Jeremiah handed it over, frustration building but voice still calm. "The seat number is clearly printed right there." Stephanie examined the pass, then looked to Whitman. "Mr. Whitman, your seat is actually 1B, the aisle seat." Whitman's face reddened. "That's unacceptable. I specifically requested 1A as I always do. I can't sit in the aisle. I need the window." "I understand, but, do you know who I am?" Whitman interrupted. "I spend over $50,000 a year with this airline." Stephanie nodded sympathetically, then turned to Jeremiah. "Sir, would you mind taking the aisle seat to accommodate Mr. Whitman? He's one of our platinum members." "I specifically selected this seat when I purchased my ticket," Jeremiah explained. "I prefer the window for overnight flights so I can sleep." Listen, Whitman interjected, leaning closer to Stephanie and lowering his voice, though not enough. I'm not comfortable sitting next to, you know. Can't you find him another seat? Jeremiah felt his stomach clench. He knew exactly what Whitman meant. Stephanie didn't correct Whitman or defend Jeremiah. Instead, she nodded almost imperceptibly and stepped back to make a call on the cabin phone. Moments later, a man in a dark blue suit approached. His badge identified him as Thomas Reynolds, customer service manager. What seems to be the issue here? Reynolds asked, addressing only Whitman. This seat was assigned to me, Jeremiah interjected, drawing Reynolds' attention. Reynolds glanced at him, then back to Whitman. Sir, is there a problem with your seating arrangement? Yes, Whitman said. I always sit in 1A. It's my preferred seat, and I'm a platinum member. Reynolds nodded thoughtfully, then turned to Jeremiah. Sir, I understand you've been assigned this seat, but we try to accommodate our frequent flyers whenever possible. Mr. Whitman flies with us weekly. So do I, Jeremiah said. And I paid for this specific seat. Reynolds' expression hardened. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to move to another seat. On what grounds? We reserve the right to reassign seats as necessary for the comfort of all passengers. Jeremiah realized what was happening. Discreetly, he took out his phone and started recording. Is it company policy to move black passengers to accommodate white passengers' comfort? He asked directly. Reynolds blinked, taken aback by the directness. That's not what's happening here, sir. This is about customer loyalty. Then move him to another first-class seat. Why am I the one being asked to move? Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to lower your voice and comply, or we'll need to remove you from the flight. I haven't raised my voice once, Jeremiah said, conscious of staying completely calm. Reynolds turned to two flight attendants hovering nearby. Please escort this passenger off the plane. He's being disruptive. I'm not being disruptive, Jeremiah countered, still recording. I'm simply asking to keep the seat I paid for. Two security officers appeared at Reynolds' signal. Sir, you need to come with us now. As Jeremiah was escorted off the plane, whispers and stares followed him. He heard Whitman say to Stephanie, thank you for handling that situation. Those people always think they're entitled to special treatment. After a humiliating walk back through the terminal, Reynolds offered Jeremiah an alternative arrangement. We can place you in economy, by the lavatory. It's the only seat left, Reynolds said without making eye contact. Jeremiah considered his options. He needed to be in San Francisco for tomorrow's meeting. Missing it would cost his company millions. Fine, he said finally. But I expect a refund for the difference in fare. You can submit a request online, Reynolds replied dismissively. Seated in the last row of economy next to the bathroom, Jeremiah found himself beside Paula Martinez, a woman in her 30s with a press badge partially hidden under her jacket. That was completely unacceptable how they treated you, she whispered once the plane was in the air. It's not the first time, Jeremiah replied, surprised by her comment. I'm a journalist. I cover stories about corporate discrimination, she explained. Would you be willing to talk about what happened? Jeremiah considered her offer. Maybe. But first, I need to make some calls when we land. Throughout the flight, he noticed flight attendants, including Stephanie who had moved from first class to help in economy, whispering and glancing his way. Look at him, acting all dignified now, he overheard one say. Probably couldn't afford first class anyway. Must have been using a stolen credit card. Jeremiah closed his eyes, not in defeat, but in calculation. This incident wasn't just about him anymore. It was about every person who'd ever been treated this way. And he had the power to do something about it. As the plane reached cruising altitude, Jeremiah's mind drifted to similar incidents throughout his life. Success hadn't shielded him from discrimination, sometimes it seemed to make him an even bigger target. Last month, he'd been followed by security throughout Bergman's, a high-end department store in downtown Baltimore, despite wearing a custom-tailored suit and Rolex watch. The guard had asked to see his receipt 3 times before he left the store. 6 months ago, the security team at his own office building had detained him when he tried to enter after hours, despite his key card and the fact that his name and photo were displayed prominently in the lobby as the founder and CEO. They'd called the police before a night janitor recognized him and intervened. And then there were the countless times taxis had passed him by to pick up white passengers, or servers had seated him by the kitchen despite empty tables with better views, or store clerks had asked if he was sure he could afford the items he was purchasing. This incident with Airstream Airlines wasn't even his first with them. 3 years ago, he'd filed a formal complaint after being repeatedly skipped during beverage service in first class. The airline had sent back a form letter stating they take all customer feedback seriously, but found no evidence of discriminatory behavior. Jeremiah pulled out his phone and began researching Airstream while connected to the in-flight Wi-Fi. What he found disturbed but didn't surprise him. Dozens of complaints from minority passengers described similar experiences. Unexplained downgrades, excessive security screenings, accusations of ticket fraud, and dismissive customer service responses. The pattern was clear, but Airstream had faced no consequences. The company's CEO, Franklin Pierce, had been quoted in a business magazine last year saying diversity initiatives were unnecessary distractions from operational excellence and that complaints about discrimination were often misunderstandings blown out of proportion. Paula Martinez noticed his research. "Finding anything interesting?" she asked quietly. "Too much," Jeremiah replied. "You said you cover corporate discrimination?" Paula nodded. "For the past 8 years. I was working on a piece about airlines when I witnessed what happened to you. Airstream has one of the worst records in the industry, but they've managed to keep it mostly under wraps. How do they manage that? Settlements with NDAs, burying complaints, manipulating their customer satisfaction data by excluding certain outlier responses, which conveniently tend to come from minority passengers." Jeremiah wasn't surprised. "I've experienced something similar with this airline before. Would you be willing to share your story? It could help expose their practices." "Perhaps," Jeremiah said. "But I might have a more effective approach in mind." Paula raised an eyebrow. "What kind of approach?" Jeremiah gave a small smile. "Let's just say I have some resources at my disposal." While Paula dozed off beside him, Jeremiah made notes in his phone and sent several encrypted messages to his executive team. He wasn't interested in revenge, but accountability and systemic change were another matter entirely. He first contacted his chief of staff, requesting detailed financial information on Airstream Airlines. Then he messaged Amara Johnson, his legal counsel, asking her to research the airline's corporate structure and any pending lawsuits. Finally, he reached out to his CFO, David Washington, with a simple question: "How liquid are we right now?" The response came back quickly: "Very. The Westfield acquisition freed up $3 billion in cash reserves." "Why?" "I'll explain later," Jeremiah replied. "But I need you to prepare for a potential major acquisition outside our usual sector." As the flight continued, Jeremiah discovered that Airstream Airlines was actually in a precarious financial position. Despite their premium pricing and cost-cutting measures, which, he noted, included reducing staff training budgets for customer service and diversity initiatives, they were overleveraged and vulnerable. Most interestingly, they were actively seeking investors to help stabilize their finances before the situation became public knowledge. Paula stirred beside him. "Sorry, I didn't mean to fall asleep," she said, straightening in her seat. "No worries. Mind if I ask you something? How deep is your research into Airstream?" "Pretty deep," she replied. "I've interviewed former employees, gathered testimonials from passengers, and collected internal documents from whistleblowers. The culture starts at the top with Pierce. He's created an environment where this kind of treatment is tacitly encouraged. Would you be willing to share what you have? Paula studied him. Normally, I protect my sources and research carefully. But after what I witnessed today, what exactly are you planning? Something more effective than an article or complaint, Jeremiah said. But I need more information first. Paula hesitated, then nodded. Okay. I'll share what I have on one condition: whatever you're planning, I want the exclusive when it happens. Deal, Jeremiah said, offering his hand. As they shook on it, Jeremiah's phone buzzed with a message from David. Airstream Airlines' parent company has a major shareholder looking to sell their 25% stake discreetly. Want me to inquire through a shell corporation? Jeremiah typed back a single word, yes. When the plane finally touched down in San Francisco, the ordeal wasn't over. As passengers stood to retrieve their bags, Stephanie made another appearance in the economy section. Sir, she said, approaching Jeremiah with an artificial smile, we need all passengers to remain seated until we've finished deplaning first class. Jeremiah noticed she wasn't making this announcement to anyone else in economy who had stood up. Of course, he replied calmly, sitting back down and continuing to record discreetly with his phone. Once allowed to deplane, Jeremiah found Thomas Reynolds waiting at the gate. Sir, I wanted to provide you with this, Reynolds said, handing him a card. Not an apology, just a customer feedback form with a case number scribbled on it. I've already documented everything, Jeremiah responded. Including the discriminatory statements made by your staff. Reynolds' smile faltered. I assure you, Airstream Airlines does not discriminate. If you feel your experience didn't meet our standards, please complete the form. I'll do more than that, Jeremiah promised, walking away. A car was waiting to take him directly to his meeting at the Fairmont Hotel. As he settled into the back seat, he received confirmation that David had made contact with the shareholder looking to sell their stake in Airstream's parent company. The merger meeting was scheduled for 1 o'clock in a private dining room. Despite the morning's events, Jeremiah arrived composed and focused. Waiting for him were his legal counsel Amara Johnson and CFO David Washington, who had flown in the previous day to prepare. You look tired, Amara observed as they hugged in greeting. Interesting flight, Jeremiah replied. I'll fill you in later. The meeting began with introductions. Across the table sat Howard Kingsley, CEO of Quantum Innovations, the company Jeremiah hoped to acquire, along with his executive team. Before we discuss the merger terms, Kingsley said after pleasantries were exchanged, I should mention my brother-in-law sends his regards. Your brother-in-law? Jeremiah asked. Franklin Pierce. He runs Airstream Airlines. Mentioned you might have been on one of his flights recently. Jeremiah maintained his poker face, but internally, pieces clicked into place. Pierce had likely been alerted about the incident by now. Small world, Jeremiah commented. Speaking of Airstream, I understand they're in a bit of financial trouble. Kingsley seemed surprised by the change in subject. Well, yes, though that's not public knowledge. They're seeking silent investors to stabilize before making an IPO push next year. How serious is their situation? Between us? Pretty dire. The pandemic hit them hard, and their recovery strategy hasn't panned out. Franklin's looking for about $300 million to keep things afloat, preferably from investors who won't demand operational control. Jeremiah nodded thoughtfully. Let's put our merger discussion on hold for a moment. I'd like to explore something else first. After the meeting, which ended without a decision on the original merger proposal, Jeremiah met privately with Amara and David in his hotel suite. We need to move quickly, he told them. I want controlling interest in Airstream, but Pierce can't know it's me until it's too late. What happened on that flight? Amara asked, concerned. Jeremiah showed them the videos he'd recorded and explained the situation in detail. This is outrageous, Amara said. We could sue them for discrimination. A lawsuit would drag on for years and probably end in a settlement with an NDA, Jeremiah replied. I want real change, not just compensation. David was reviewing financial documents on his tablet. Based on their current stock price and the leverage we could apply through strategic purchasing, we could potentially acquire 51% for around $600 million. It's outside our usual tech investments, but doable. Make it happen, Jeremiah said. But through shell companies and blind trusts. I don't want anyone connecting this to me or NextGen until we're ready. As they were developing their strategy, Jeremiah received a text from Paula Martinez, got more evidence. Their discrimination goes deeper than I thought. Former employee willing to talk. When can we meet? Jeremiah replied, dinner. 8 p.m. Send me the address. He faced a critical decision: pursue personal revenge against those who had humiliated him, or work towards systemic change that would prevent others from experiencing similar treatment. The answer was clear. This wasn't about him anymore. That evening, as he entered his penthouse suite at the Fairmont, Jeremiah opened his laptop and began drafting an email to his entire executive team: emergency project. Utmost discretion required. Conference call at midnight EST. The subject line read simply, Operation Accountability. The digital clock on Jeremiah's laptop showed 12 a.m. as faces appeared on his screen. His elite financial team had assembled virtually within minutes of his urgent call. A testament to the loyalty he'd built over years of ethical leadership. Thank you all for joining at this hour, Jeremiah began, sitting at the desk in his hotel suite. The San Francisco skyline glittered behind him through floor-to-ceiling windows. What I'm about to share requires absolute confidentiality. He played portions of the videos from the flight, then explained his intention to acquire Airstream Airlines. $600 million for an airline? Questioned Nina Patel, his chief investment officer. That's a significant deviation from our technology focus. It's not about diversifying our portfolio, Jeremiah clarified. It's about accountability and driving change in an industry that's failed to address systematic discrimination. With all due respect, said Victor Hayes, his risk assessment director, using company funds for what could be perceived as a personal vendetta might concern our shareholders. Jeremiah leaned forward. This isn't about revenge. What happened to me happens to people of color every day on airlines across this country. Most don't have the resources to fight back. We do. He pulled up a presentation prepared in the hours since landing. Airstream has a documented history of discrimination complaints that have been systematically buried. Their CEO has publicly dismissed diversity initiatives as unnecessary distractions. Their training materials include problematic profiling guidance disguised as customer service priorities. And to be clear, added Amara Johnson, joining from her own hotel room down the hall, we're not just doing this because of one incident. We're doing it because that incident exposed a pattern that needs to be addressed. David Washington shared his screen, showing a complex flowchart. We've developed a strategy to acquire controlling interest through multiple shell companies and investment vehicles. No single purchase will trigger reporting requirements, and Airstream won't know who's behind the acquisition until we've secured 51%. The beauty of this approach, Jeremiah continued, is that once we have control, we can implement real changes, new training programs, revised policies, accountability measures, and consequences for discriminatory behavior. The team spent the next 2 hours refining the strategy, identifying potential risks, and assigning roles. By 2 a.m., Operation Accountability was officially underway. While his financial team worked through the night, Jeremiah met with Paula Martinez at a quiet restaurant near Union Square. She'd brought Jackson Williams, former HR director at Airstream, who had been fired after raising concerns about discrimination. The problems go all the way to the top, Jackson explained. Pierce explicitly told us to minimize discrimination complaints in our reporting. Any employee who raised concerns was marginalized or pushed out. Do you have documentation? Jeremiah asked. Jackson nodded. Emails, training materials, internal memos, statistical analyses showing how complaints from minority passengers were handled differently. I kept everything when I left. This could be crucial evidence, Paula said. But what exactly are you planning to do with it? Jeremiah smiled. Let's just say Airstream is about to experience some turbulence. Over the next 48 hours, Jeremiah's team executed their plan with precision. Through 26 different entities, they began acquiring Airstream stock. Simultaneously, Paula and her newspaper colleagues gathered testimonies from other passengers on Jeremiah's flight who had witnessed the incident. Amara's legal team secured the airport surveillance footage through a carefully worded request that the airline couldn't easily deny. The footage clearly showed Jeremiah being escorted off the plane while Whitman smirked in the background. Meanwhile, unaware of what was happening, Airstream's board met to discuss their financial challenges. They unanimously approved an investment proposal from what they believed was a consortium of technology investors looking to diversify. In reality, it was Jeremiah's primary shell company. How would you react if you were in Jeremiah's position? Comment number 1 if you think he should publicly expose the airline staff who discriminated against him, or number 2 if you believe he should focus on changing the company's culture from within. Don't forget to like and subscribe to see how this powerful story unfolds. What do you think will happen when the airline discovers who their new owner really is? Paula Martinez was in her element. The veteran investigative journalist had been building a case against Airstream for months, but Jeremiah's experience and resources had accelerated her timeline dramatically. Another former flight attendant just agreed to talk, she told Jeremiah over coffee at a small cafe near the financial district. That makes 15 current and former employees willing to go on record about the discriminatory culture. What's their story? Jeremiah asked, checking his phone for updates from his acquisition team. Shannon Lewis, 8 years with Airstream. She witnessed black passengers being randomly selected for additional screening at a rate of 6 to 1 compared to white passengers. When she raised concerns, her supervisor told her to stick to serving drinks and leave security to the professionals. Jeremiah nodded. Add her testimony to the file. We're building a comprehensive case that can't be dismissed as isolated incidents. Over the next several days, Paula's investigation uncovered increasingly troubling evidence. Internal training materials advised staff to give additional attention to passengers who don't match the typical customer profile, thinly veiled code for racial profiling. Financial records showed that compensation offers for complaint resolution varied significantly based on the complainant's perceived race, with white passengers receiving offers averaging 62% higher than people of color for identical issues. A trove of emails revealed senior management deliberately burying discrimination complaints, categorizing them as customer misunderstandings rather than policy violations. Most damning was a recording of a staff meeting where Thomas Reynolds and Stephanie Wilson openly mocked passengers of color who had filed complaints. "Did you see that guy in 3B last week?" Thomas could be heard saying. "Wearing those fancy clothes like he belonged in first class. Probably his first time on a plane." "I know," Stephanie replied with a laugh. "They always act so entitled. Like we owe them something." While Paula gathered evidence, Jeremiah anonymously funded legal support for past victims who had been silenced by the airline's tactics. Through a foundation established for this purpose, he connected dozens of former passengers with top discrimination attorneys willing to revisit their cases. The investigation also revealed CEO Franklin Pierce's direct role in obstructing diversity initiatives. In a confidential memo to board members, Pierce had written, "These diversity programs are costly distractions from our core business objectives. Our demographic targeting is precise and intentional, we know who our valuable customers are." When confronted with discrimination claims, Airstream's legal team had a standard response: "These are isolated incidents that do not reflect company policy." But the mounting evidence suggested otherwise. The discrimination was systematic, intentional, and profitable in their view. Jackson Williams, the former HR director, provided Jeremiah with detailed accounts of how he was fired after presenting leadership with data showing clear patterns of discrimination. I compiled a report showing that complaints from minority passengers were 87% more likely to be dismissed without investigation, Jackson explained during a confidential meeting in Jeremiah's hotel suite. Pierce called me into his office the next day and said I was creating problems where none existed. 2 weeks later, I was let go for performance issues despite having received excellent reviews for 7 years. With each new revelation, Jeremiah became more convinced that his approach was necessary. This wasn't just about his experience, it was about a corporate culture that enabled and encouraged discrimination at every level. By the 5th day of their investigation, Jeremiah's financial team had quietly acquired 47% of Airstream's stock. They needed just 4% more to gain controlling interest. The airline remained oblivious to what was happening. Their stock had risen slightly due to the increased trading activity, which their financial officers interpreted as positive market response to their new investment partnerships. That evening, Jeremiah received an urgent text from one of his financial analysts. CEO Pierce has called emergency board meeting for tomorrow. Subject: concerning patterns in recent stock acquisitions. They're starting to notice. Jeremiah forwarded the message to David and Amara with a simple instruction: accelerate final purchases. We need 51% before that meeting. As he waited for confirmation, Jeremiah reviewed the comprehensive dossier Paula had compiled. The evidence was overwhelming and irrefutable. When he took control, there would be no question about the legitimacy of the changes he planned to implement. His phone buzzed with a message from David: mission accomplished. 51.3% acquired. We own Airstream Airlines. Jeremiah allowed himself a small smile. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. He sent a message to Paula: it's done. Be ready with your camera crew at Airstream headquarters tomorrow at 2 p.m. You'll get your exclusive. Then he called Amara. Prepare the paperwork for my appointment as executive chairman, effective immediately. And draft termination notices for Pierce, Reynolds, and Wilson. As he ended the call, Jeremiah looked out at the San Francisco skyline. Tomorrow would change everything, not just for him, but for every passenger who had ever been discriminated against by Airstream. The next morning, Jeremiah entered Airstream's headquarters in downtown San Francisco through the main entrance, dressed in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit. No one recognized him as the passenger who had been humiliated days earlier. He spent an hour observing the workplace culture, sitting quietly in the lobby pretending to review documents. He noticed how security treated visitors differently based on their appearance and how executives interacted with staff of different backgrounds. Every observation confirmed what the investigation had revealed: discrimination was deeply embedded in Airstream's culture. At 1:55 p.m., he took the elevator to the executive floor where the emergency board meeting was scheduled to begin. Paula and her camera crew were positioned discreetly in the reception area, having been granted access through Jeremiah's new authority as majority shareholder, though no one at Airstream yet knew this. Inside the boardroom, CEO Franklin Pierce was addressing the nervous directors. Someone is attempting a hostile takeover, Pierce explained, pointing to charts showing the recent stock acquisitions. Multiple entities have been purchasing our shares aggressively. We need to implement defensive measures immediately. Who's behind it? Asked one director. We're not sure, Pierce admitted. Our financial team has traced the purchases to various shell companies and investment vehicles, but they can't identify the ultimate buyer. The boardroom door opened, and all heads turned as Jeremiah walked in confidently. Sorry I'm late, he said casually. Thomas Reynolds, who was sitting near Pierce, recognized him immediately. His face drained of color. Stephanie Wilson, who had been invited to the meeting to discuss a customer service initiative, froze with a coffee cup halfway to her lips. Excuse me, Pierce said sternly. This is a private board meeting. How did you get in here? I believe I have an invitation, Jeremiah replied, setting a document on the table. As the majority shareholder of Airstream Airlines, The room fell silent as Pierce snatched up the paper, his eyes widening as he read. "This is impossible," he sputtered. "You can't have acquired 51%. Our stock is not that vulnerable." "And yet, I have," Jeremiah said calmly. "Allow me to introduce myself properly. I'm Jeremiah Taylor, CEO of NextGen Solutions." Recognition dawned on several board members' faces. Jeremiah's company was well known in the business world for its innovative technology and ethical practices. "Why would a tech CEO want an airline?" one director asked. "Excellent question," Jeremiah replied. He nodded toward the door, where Paula and her crew now entered with his permission. "I think it's best if everyone understands exactly why I'm here." He connected his phone to the room's projection system and played the videos from his flight. The board watched in stunned silence as the discrimination unfolded before them. When the videos ended, Jeremiah switched to a presentation of the evidence Paula had gathered. Testimonies, internal documents, statistical analyses, and recorded conversations. "This," Jeremiah said, pointing to the screen, "is why I'm here. Airstream Airlines has a documented history of systematic discrimination against passengers of color. It's embedded in your training, your policies, and your corporate culture." Thomas Reynolds stood up, his face red. "That's a gross mischaracterization of what happened. You were being disruptive and refusing to comply with crew instructions." "The videos show otherwise," Jeremiah replied calmly. "But this isn't just about my experience. It's about hundreds of similar incidents that have been systematically buried by this company." Stephanie Wilson spoke next, her voice trembling. "We were just following company protocol for handling difficult passengers." "Is it protocol to mock passengers of color in staff meetings?" Jeremiah asked, playing the recording of her conversation with Thomas. Stephanie paled as her own voice filled the room. CEO Franklin Pierce attempted to regain control of the situation. "Mr. Taylor, I apologize if you had a negative experience on one of our flights. We'd be happy to offer compensation and, I'm not interested in compensation," Jeremiah interrupted. "I'm interested in accountability and change." Pierce's expression hardened. "If this is some kind of vendetta because you felt slighted, I assure you our legal team will." "Your legal team now works for me," Jeremiah reminded him. "As does everyone in this room." Thomas Reynolds, seeing his career crumbling before his eyes, tried a different approach. "Look, there might have been a misunderstanding, but we were just trying to accommodate a valued customer, by removing me from a seat I paid for because of my race." Jeremiah asked pointedly. "That's not what happened," Thomas insisted, though his voice lacked conviction. "Then explain to me, and to the board, and to Ms. Martinez's audience," Jeremiah said, gesturing to the camera, "exactly why I was removed from my seat." Thomas looked desperately around the room, finding no support. "Mr. Whitman is a platinum member who requested specific accommodation, and you decided his comfort was more important than my rights," Jeremiah finished for him. Some board members were now looking at their CEO with new eyes, clearly disturbed by what they were learning. "Franklin," one of them asked, "did you know about these practices?" Before Pierce could respond, security personnel appeared at the door, summoned by a nervous executive assistant who had overheard raised voices. The security team hesitated, unsure who they should be responding to. "It's all right," Jeremiah told them. "There's no security issue here. Just a change in management." The security officers, now aware that Jeremiah was the new majority owner, nodded respectfully and stepped back. Franklin Pierce made one last attempt to salvage the situation. "Whatever your grievances, this is hardly the way to address them. We can discuss this privately and come to a reasonable arrangement." "The time for private discussions has passed," Jeremiah replied. "For too long, Airstream has handled discrimination complaints by burying them. That ends today." He turned to address the entire board. "As the new executive chairman, effective immediately, I'll be implementing comprehensive changes to Airstream's policies, training, and corporate culture. Those who embrace these changes will have a place in the company's future. Those who don't, won't. The stunned silence in the room was broken by the sound of more people entering. Amara Johnson walked in with a team of attorneys, carrying documents for the board to sign. These formalize my position and outline the initial changes that will be implemented, Jeremiah explained as the papers were distributed. Thomas Reynolds, seeing his career imploding, broke down. "We were just doing what we were trained to do," he admitted. "The priority was always keeping our high-value customers happy, even if that meant making assumptions about other passengers." Stephanie Wilson quickly tried to distance herself from responsibility. "It's the culture here. Everyone does it. We're just following the example set by management." Other executives began turning on each other, trying to minimize their own culpability. Jeremiah let them talk, recording everything for future reference. When the finger-pointing subsided, he introduced Amara to the board. "This is Amara Johnson, who will be serving as Airstream's new Chief Compliance Officer. She'll be overseeing the implementation of new anti-discrimination policies and training programs." As Amara outlined her initial plans, Jeremiah noticed several board members exchanging glances before one raised her hand. "In light of these revelations, I believe it would be appropriate for me to tender my resignation," she said. Others quickly followed suit. "I appreciate your integrity," Jeremiah told them. "But rather than accepting resignations, I'm asking each of you to be part of the solution. Help us transform Airstream into a model of inclusive customer service." The atmosphere in the room began to shift from defensive to cautiously collaborative, when suddenly the door burst open again. Paula Martinez had returned with her camera crew. "Mr. Taylor," she called out. "Would you care to comment on the breaking story about Airstream's acquisition and the discrimination allegations?" All eyes turned to Jeremiah. This was the moment he could publicly humiliate those who had humiliated him, expose them on camera and watch their reputations crumble. The temptation was powerful. Thomas Reynolds and Stephanie Wilson looked terrified. Franklin Pierce's face was ashen. They knew their careers and reputations hung in the balance of Jeremiah's next words. The room fell into tense silence as Jeremiah considered Paula's question. The camera's red light blinked steadily, recording every moment of this extraordinary confrontation. "Before I answer," Jeremiah said calmly, "I'd like to play something for everyone here." He connected his phone to the room's sound system and pressed play. The recording was crystal clear, a conversation between Thomas Reynolds and Stephanie Wilson after they had removed Jeremiah from first class. "That takes care of that problem," Thomas could be heard saying. "Whitman will be pleased. Did you see his face when security showed up?" Stephanie replied with a laugh. "They always act so shocked, like they don't know their place." $5,000 for a first-class ticket, Thomas scoffed. "Probably borrowed someone's credit card. People like that don't belong in our premium cabins." Jeremiah stopped the recording and looked directly at Thomas and Stephanie, who sat frozen in horror at hearing their own voices. "Would either of you care to explain what you meant by people like that?" he asked quietly. The security officers who had remained by the door shifted uncomfortably. Several board members looked down, unable to meet Jeremiah's gaze. Thomas attempted to speak but could only stammer incoherently. Stephanie began to cry silently. Franklin Pierce tried to salvage the situation. "Mr. Taylor, I want to emphasize that these views do not reflect Airstream's official position, don't they?" Jeremiah interrupted, gesturing for Amara to distribute documents to everyone in the room. "These are statistical analyses of passenger complaints filed with Airstream over the past 5 years, categorized by race." The board members flipped through the reports with growing concern. "As you can see," Jeremiah continued, "complaints from passengers of color were dismissed without investigation at a rate 87% higher than those from white passengers. Compensation offers for identical issues were 62% lower. And random security screenings targeted minority passengers at a rate of 6 to 1. He pulled up another document on the projection screen. This is an email from CEO Pierce to the executive team, dated last year, regarding diversity training proposals. The email read, "These initiatives are expensive distractions. Our premium customers have clear preferences about their flying experience, and our job is to cater to those preferences, not challenge them with social experiments." Pierce's face reddened. That email is being taken out of context. What context would make this acceptable? Jeremiah asked. The room fell silent again. Thomas Reynolds, seeing his career crumbling before him, finally broke. "Look, we were just doing our jobs. The whole industry operates this way. Premium customers pay more, so they get what they want. If they're uncomfortable sitting next to certain people, we accommodate them. It's just business." His outburst hung in the air, captured perfectly by Paula's camera. "Just business," Jeremiah repeated slowly. "Let me tell you about business, Mr. Reynolds. My company, NextGen Solutions, generates annual revenue of $4.2 billion. We employ over 8,000 people worldwide. We have consistently been ranked among the top 10 places to work in America because we understand that treating people with dignity isn't just morally right, it's good business." He turned to address the entire room. "Discrimination isn't just wrong, it's expensive. It costs you talented employees, loyal customers, and your reputation. The practices I've uncovered at Airstream have likely cost this company millions in lost revenue from passengers who chose other airlines after experiencing discrimination." Franklin Pierce attempted one last defense. "Mr. Taylor, I understand you're upset about your personal experience, but you've gone to extraordinary lengths for what amounts to revenge." "This isn't about revenge," Jeremiah replied firmly. "If it were, I would simply fire everyone involved and walk away. This is about transformation, creating systemic change that prevents others from experiencing what I and countless others have endured." He turned to Paula's camera. "To answer your question, Ms. Martinez, yes, I have acquired controlling interest in Airstream Airlines. And yes, I experienced discrimination as a passenger. But this acquisition isn't about punishing individuals, it's about changing a corporate culture that has enabled discrimination to flourish." Paula pressed further. "Will there be consequences for the employees involved in your incident?" Jeremiah looked directly at Thomas and Stephanie. "Accountability is essential for meaningful change. Those who participated in discriminatory practices will face appropriate consequences, but also be given the opportunity to learn, grow, and become part of the solution." Thomas stood up abruptly. "This is ridiculous. You can't just walk in here and, Mr. Reynolds," Jeremiah interrupted calmly, "you're currently addressing the majority shareholder and executive chairman of your company. I suggest you choose your next words carefully." Thomas fell silent, the reality of his situation finally sinking in. Amara Johnson stepped forward. "As part of our new compliance program, all employees will undergo comprehensive anti-bias training. Those who committed serious violations will be placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Those investigations will be fair, thorough, and transparent." A board member raised her hand. "What specifically will change under your leadership, Mr. Taylor?" "Everything," Jeremiah replied. "New hiring practices to ensure diversity at all levels. Revised training programs that explicitly address implicit bias. Clear accountability measures for discriminatory behavior. Independent review of all past discrimination complaints. And most importantly, a fundamental shift in how we view our responsibility to all passengers, regardless of race, gender, or appearance." Franklin Pierce, seeing the board's receptiveness to Jeremiah's vision, attempted to align himself with the new direction. "I want to assure you, Mr. Taylor, that I fully support these initiatives and would be happy to help implement." "That won't be necessary," Jeremiah interrupted. "Effective immediately, you are on administrative leave pending a comprehensive review of your role in fostering this discriminatory culture." Pierce's face fell as he realized his attempts at self-preservation had failed. "Security will escort you, Mr. Reynolds, and Ms. Wilson to HR to begin the transition process, Jeremiah continued. Your access to company systems has already been suspended. As security approached, Thomas made one desperate attempt to save himself. You can't do this. I have a family, a mortgage, so do the countless people who've been humiliated by this airline, Jeremiah responded. Actions have consequences, Mr. Reynolds. This is yours. As the three were escorted out, Paula turned to Jeremiah. That was remarkably measured, considering what they did to you. This isn't about personal revenge, Jeremiah reiterated. It's about creating lasting change. He addressed the remaining board members. We have an opportunity to transform Airstream into an industry leader in equitable customer service. Those who share this vision are welcome to be part of it. Those who don't should tender their resignations by the end of day. Several members nodded in agreement. Others looked uncertain but remained silent. As the meeting concluded, Paula approached Jeremiah. My viewers will want to know. What made you decide to buy an entire airline rather than simply suing them or going to another carrier? Jeremiah considered the question. When you have the resources to create systemic change, you also have the responsibility to do so. I could have filed a lawsuit that would have been settled quietly with no real change. I could have taken my business elsewhere, leaving the problem intact for others to face. Instead, I chose to transform the system itself. Paula nodded appreciatively. That's a powerful perspective. Would you be willing to share more details about your plans for Airstream in an exclusive interview? Absolutely, Jeremiah replied. But first, we have work to do. As they left the boardroom, employees in the hallway watched in stunned silence, aware that their company had just undergone a seismic shift. The era of unchecked discrimination at Airstream had ended. A new day was beginning. In the weeks following the boardroom confrontation, Airstream Airlines underwent a comprehensive transformation under Jeremiah's leadership. The changes were swift, substantial, and sometimes met with resistance. On his first official day as executive chairman, Jeremiah addressed all 8,000 Airstream employees via live stream. Today marks the beginning of a new chapter for this company, he told them. A chapter defined by respect, equity, and excellence in how we treat every passenger and each other. He outlined a 90-day plan to overhaul the airline's approach to customer service and employee relations. The initiatives included a complete revision of training programs, with mandatory anti-bias education for all customer-facing staff, independent review of all discrimination complaints filed in the past 5 years, new hiring and promotion policies to ensure diversity at all levels, transparent reporting of customer satisfaction data across demographic groups, a confidential whistleblower program for employees to report discriminatory practices, financial compensation for passengers with verified discrimination claims. Not everyone embraced the changes. A vocal minority of longtime employees, particularly those who had thrived under the old culture, pushed back against what they called political correctness gone too far. We're in the business of making money, not social justice, complained Walter Simmons, a veteran sales director, during a tense management meeting. Those aren't mutually exclusive, Jeremiah responded calmly. Data shows that inclusive companies outperform their peers by 35%. Discrimination isn't just wrong, it's bad business. Thomas Reynolds and Stephanie Wilson remained on administrative leave while their cases were reviewed. CEO Franklin Pierce, faced with overwhelming evidence of his role in fostering the discriminatory culture, negotiated a resignation package significantly smaller than what he had initially demanded. I still believe we were simply responding to market realities, Pierce told Jeremiah during their final meeting. Our premium customers have preferences. And you chose to cater to prejudice rather than challenge it, Jeremiah replied. That's not market reality, that's moral failure. As news of Airstream's transformation spread, reactions were mixed. Some customers threatened to take their business elsewhere, objecting to what one called forced diversity. But for every customer who left, 3 new ones appeared, attracted by the company's new commitment to equitable service. Amara Johnson, now permanently installed as Chief Compliance Officer, implemented a rigorous system for tracking and addressing potential discrimination. Every complaint was thoroughly investigated, and employees found to have engaged in discriminatory behavior faced consequences ranging from additional training to termination. Paula Martinez's exposé on Airstream's transformation went viral, triggering industry-wide examination of how airlines treated passengers of color. Competitor airlines, seeing the positive public response to Airstream's changes, began implementing similar reforms. Not all the pushback came from within. Jeremiah faced criticism from some of NextGen's investors, who questioned the wisdom of diverting resources to an airline acquisition. "We invested in a tech company, not a social experiment," one board member complained during a tense conference call. "This isn't a diversion, it's an expansion," Jeremiah countered. "And it's already paying dividends. Airstream stock has risen 18% since our acquisition, and NextGen has received unprecedented positive press for leading meaningful change in an industry that desperately needed it." The personal toll on Jeremiah was significant. He received death threats on social media from people outraged by what they perceived as reverse discrimination. Security had to be increased at both NextGen and Airstream offices. During a particularly difficult week, when the criticism seemed overwhelming, Jeremiah found himself questioning whether the acquisition had been worth it. That evening, he received an email that changed his perspective. "Mr. Taylor," it read. "My 13-year-old son was humiliated on an Airstream flight last year when a flight attendant accused him of stealing an iPad that was actually his. I filed a complaint that was dismissed without investigation. Yesterday, we received a personal apology from your new customer relations team and an offer of compensation. More importantly, my son saw a black man stand up and create change that directly impacted his life. You've shown him what's possible. Thank you." Messages like this reinforced Jeremiah's commitment to seeing the transformation through, despite the challenges. 3 months after taking control, Jeremiah faced a crucial decision: sell the airline after implementing reforms or stay and lead the transformation personally. Airstream was now operating profitably with new leadership and policies in place. Several potential buyers had expressed interest, offering significant returns on his investment. "You've made your point," David advised during a strategy session. "You could sell now, make a healthy profit, and return your full attention to NextGen." "This was never about making a point or turning a profit," Jeremiah replied. "It was about creating lasting change. If I sell now, what guarantees do we have that the new owners would maintain these policies?" After careful consideration, Jeremiah decided to retain ownership but appoint a new CEO who shared his vision for equitable service. He selected Gabrielle Winters, a respected airline executive known for her commitment to diversity and operational excellence. Airstream will be a model for what's possible when a company truly commits to treating all customers with dignity, Gabrielle declared at her introduction press conference. "This isn't just a corporate value, it's our competitive advantage." As for Thomas Reynolds and Stephanie Wilson, their fates reflected Jeremiah's balanced approach to accountability. After thorough investigation confirmed their pattern of discriminatory behavior, both were terminated. However, Jeremiah established a program allowing them and others to earn reinstatement through community service, anti-bias education, and demonstrated commitment to change. "Firing people doesn't change hearts and minds," Jeremiah explained to Paula during a follow-up interview. "We're offering a path to redemption for those willing to do the work." 6 months after the acquisition, Jeremiah boarded an Airstream flight from San Francisco to Baltimore, the same route where he had experienced discrimination. The difference was palpable from the moment he entered the terminal. The check-in process was efficient and respectful. The diverse flight crew greeted all passengers with the same warm professionalism. When he settled into his first-class seat, no one questioned his right to be there. As the plane reached cruising altitude, Jeremiah reflected on how much had changed in such a short time. Airstream was now regularly cited as an example of how corporate culture could be transformed with the right leadership and accountability measures. Mid-flight, a flight attendant he didn't recognize approached his seat. "Mr. Taylor," she said quietly. "I just wanted to thank you. I've worked for Airstream for 12 years, and for the first time, I'm proud to wear this uniform." Her simple statement confirmed what Jeremiah already knew: the hardest decision had been the right one. By choosing transformation over revenge, he had created change that extended far beyond one flight or one airline. As the plane began its descent into Baltimore, Jeremiah gazed out the window at the city where he'd grown up facing discrimination at every turn. Tomorrow, he would visit his old neighborhood to announce a new scholarship program for minority business students, funded by his personal profits from the Airstream acquisition. The circle was complete. The humiliation he had experienced had been transformed into opportunity for others, proof that even the most painful experiences could become catalysts for positive change. 1 year to the day after being removed from his first-class seat, Jeremiah Taylor found himself once again at Baltimore International Airport. This time, however, he wasn't just another passenger. He was greeted personally by the airport director and Airstream's new leadership team. "Welcome, Mr. Taylor," said Gabrielle Winters, the CEO he had appointed. "We've prepared something special for today's anniversary." Jeremiah followed her through the terminal, noticing the changes immediately. The staff was noticeably more diverse. Signs in multiple languages welcomed travelers. At security checkpoints, clear guidelines ensured consistent screening procedures for all passengers. At the gate, Jeremiah was surprised to find a small ceremony underway. A plaque was being unveiled, the Taylor Initiative, committed to dignity for all passengers. "This isn't just for show," Gabrielle explained. "Every Airstream employee undergoes training that includes the story of what happened to you and how it transformed our airline. Your experience has become a powerful teaching tool." Boarding the flight, Jeremiah noticed more changes. The crew, led by Captain Michael Johnson, was diverse in every sense. The flight attendants interacted with all passengers with the same respectful attention. There was no sign of the preferential treatment that had once been standard practice. As Jeremiah settled into his seat, 1A, just like before, the lead flight attendant approached. "Mr. Taylor, on behalf of everyone at Airstream, I want to thank you for showing us a better way forward," she said, handing him a letter. "This is from our entire crew." The handwritten note expressed gratitude for the changes he had implemented and the positive impact on both passengers and employees. It was signed by every crew member on the flight. During the journey, Jeremiah reflected on the past year's transformation. The numbers told part of the story. Customer satisfaction scores had increased by 28%, employee retention had improved, discrimination complaints had decreased by 93%, and surprisingly to some, profitability had actually increased. But the human stories meant more than the statistics. Like Jackson Williams, the whistleblower who had been reinstated as Vice President of Human Resources. Or the dozens of passengers who had finally received justice for past discrimination. Or the industry-wide reforms that other airlines had implemented following Airstream's example. Thomas Reynolds and Stephanie Wilson had taken different paths after their termination. Thomas had initially threatened a lawsuit but eventually enrolled in the redemption program Jeremiah had established. After 6 months of community service working with underserved communities and completing extensive anti-bias training, he had been hired by a different airline in a non-customer-facing role. His perspective had genuinely shifted, and he now spoke openly about his former prejudices and the harm they had caused. Stephanie had chosen a different route. She had left the airline industry altogether and now worked with a nonprofit organization helping to improve relations between law enforcement and communities of color. Her first-hand understanding of how bias operates in organizations made her uniquely effective in this role. Former CEO Franklin Pierce had faded into obscurity, his reputation tarnished by the revelations about his leadership. His brother-in-law's company, which Jeremiah had originally planned to acquire, had eventually sought a different buyer, unwilling to partner with someone who had exposed their family members' failings. Paula Martinez had won a prestigious journalism award for her exposé on Airstream. Her continuing investigation into discrimination across the airline industry had triggered congressional hearings and new regulatory guidelines. As for Bradley Whitman, the passenger who had complained about sitting next to Jeremiah, he had faced his own consequences. When the story broke, his company had distanced themselves from his behavior and placed him on leave. He had eventually issued a public apology, though its sincerity remained questionable. The flight landed smoothly in San Francisco. As passengers deplaned, Jeremiah noticed a familiar face in the jet bridge. A former Airstream employee who had been fired for discriminatory behavior but had since completed the redemption program. "Mr. Taylor," the woman said hesitantly. "I don't know if you remember me. I was working the day you were removed from your flight." "I remember," Jeremiah replied neutrally. "I wanted to apologize in person," she continued. "I didn't speak up when I should have. I was part of a system that was wrong, and I was wrong for going along with it." Jeremiah studied her face and saw genuine remorse. "Apology accepted," he said, offering his hand. "What matters is what we do going forward." "Thank you," she replied, tears in her eyes. "I'm working with your training team now, sharing my experience to help others recognize and address bias. It's the most meaningful work I've ever done." This unexpected reconciliation reinforced Jeremiah's belief in the possibility of genuine transformation, not just of systems, but of people. Later that day, Jeremiah visited the community center in his childhood neighborhood in Oakland. The center now housed the headquarters of the Taylor Foundation, which provided scholarships for minority business students and supported entrepreneurs from underrepresented communities. As he addressed a group of high school students, Jeremiah shared the lesson he had learned through his experience with Airstream. "When you face discrimination, you have three choices," he told them. "You can accept it and move on. You can fight it individually through complaints or lawsuits. Or, if you're in a position to do so, you can change the system itself. That third option is the hardest but creates the most lasting impact." A young man raised his hand. "But what if you don't have billions of dollars to buy a company?" Jeremiah smiled. "You don't need billions to create change. Start where you are, with what you have. Join organizations pushing for policy reforms. Support businesses with inclusive practices. Document discrimination when you see it. Stand up for others. Small actions multiplied across millions of people create powerful movements." As he concluded his talk, Jeremiah noticed a commotion at the back of the room. A man was being asked to leave a nearby coffee shop after the staff had wrongly accused him of not paying for his drink. Without hesitation, Jeremiah excused himself and headed across the street. He introduced himself to the shop owner and calmly explained what he had observed from the window. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," he said diplomatically. "I saw this gentleman pay for his drink." The owner, recognizing Jeremiah, immediately apologized to the customer. But Jeremiah didn't stop there. He sat down with both men and facilitated a conversation about assumptions and their consequences. By the time he left, the shop owner had agreed to implement training for his staff and had offered the customer a sincere apology and a month of free coffee. It was a small incident compared to transforming an entire airline, but it represented the same principle. The work of creating a more equitable world happened one interaction at a time, through countless decisions to choose justice over convenience, accountability over avoidance, and transformation over revenge. As Jeremiah drove back to his hotel, he reflected on how his life had changed since that fateful flight. The humiliation he had experienced had become a catalyst for change that extended far beyond him. What had begun as a response to personal discrimination had evolved into a movement for institutional transformation. The journey wasn't over. Discrimination remained a reality in countless industries and interactions. But Airstream stood as proof that change was possible. That systems built on bias could be dismantled and rebuilt with equity at their foundation. Jeremiah's phone buzzed with a text from Gabrielle. "Board approved expansion of the Taylor Initiative to our international routes. Global training begins next month." He smiled, satisfied that the transformation would continue long after today's anniversary. The work of creating lasting change was never finished, but every step forward mattered. Every policy reformed, every mind changed, every dignity preserved was a victory worth celebrating. This story illustrates a powerful truth: when faced with discrimination, we have choices that extend beyond acceptance or individual protest. Jeremiah Taylor could have simply filed a complaint, launched a lawsuit, or taken his business elsewhere. Instead, he chose the path of systemic change, transforming an entire organization from within. The lesson here isn't that everyone needs billions to fight injustice. Rather, it's that creating meaningful change requires addressing root causes, not just symptoms. Discrimination thrives in environments where it's tolerated, incentivized, or ignored. True transformation happens when we challenge these systems directly. Jeremiah's approach balanced accountability with opportunity for growth. He didn't simply punish those who wronged him. He created pathways for education, redemption, and lasting cultural change. He recognized that dismantling discrimination requires both consequences for harmful actions and opportunities to learn and improve. Perhaps most importantly, this story reminds us that our response to injustice can transcend personal vindication. By focusing on systemic change rather than personal revenge, Jeremiah turned his humiliating experience into a catalyst for transformation that benefited countless others. The power to create change exists at every level. Whether through small daily acts of allyship or larger institutional reforms, each of us can contribute to building more equitable environments where dignity is the standard for all. Have you ever witnessed discrimination and wished you could do something meaningful about it? Share your story in the comments. Your experience could inspire others to take action. How would you have handled Jeremiah's situation? Would you have pursued systemic change like he did, or taken a different approach? If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more powerful narratives that explore social justice issues. Your subscription supports our mission to share stories that matter and spark important conversations. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message of accountability and transformation. Together, we can create ripples of change that extend far beyond our individual experiences. Thank you for joining us today. Remember, creating a more just world doesn't always require extraordinary resources. It starts with each of us standing up for what's right in our daily lives. Until next time, keep believing in the power of transformation.